Welcome back to JP's Budget Collecting and our weekly look back at the hot comics from 6 months ago. We took a week off last week for the holidays, but we are back here at the beginning of December, and we are looking back at the hot comics from June 5th, 2020, and I'm recording this on December 4th, 2020. We're almost out of 2020. Thank you. And as always, we're looking back at the CBSI Hot Top 10 and the Comic Tom Key Collector Hottest 10 Trending Comics of the Week. Those are the two lists we use. This week we actually have 20 books to talk about because they didn't have any books matching. Still not sure how that happens, but anyway, and this is a very strange list, I will say, before we get into it. There are some oddballs that we don't typically, kinds of things that we don't typically see on these lists. But as always, we're looking back at these books to try to understand what made them hot, what were the factors behind that, and how have they done since? Have those factors maintained the price? Have they dropped back? Would you have been better off waiting, or should you have jumped on it when you had the chance? So with that, let's dig into this list. And first up, we have our only kind of option news of the week, and this is Distant Soil number 6, and this is the first appearance of PandaCon. Which was a character that maybe you remember from late 80s, early 90s, that was kind of part of the Usagi, TMNT kind of world, a samurai panda. Yes, they made some movies about that, but not this character. So this character has now been optioned supposedly for an animated series. So that made this book jump from a $1 book to a $50 book. Now it's a $10 to $20-ish book. So this is way down in the 6 months, which is kind of typical for these option things, as we've talked about over and over again. There's news, people go chase the book. There's no news, people forget about it. There's news, they go chase it, so on and so forth. And these option to production take a long time. So next we have a graphic novel. We don't get many of these on the list. This is 7. This is the hardcover graphic novel of a series that was basically told from the killer in the movie's point of view. It was several issues. It was collected into this hardcover. It is based on the movie. It's just told from the opposite kind of point of view as opposed to the detectives. It's from the killers. And back then, one went for $285. This is a pretty hard hardcover to find, so it was a big number for a sale. I couldn't find any sales since then. Well, at least not in the last 3 months. There's only one currently listed on eBay that I could find, and that was for $110. And it hasn't been, looks like it had been listed for a while, hadn't sold. So this one I'm going to call down, just because there's one for a little over a third of the money that's not sitting there, not selling. So, but kind of a cool, hard to find hardcover. So if you see one somewhere, it might be worth grabbing. And especially if you're a fan of that movie. Next we have another oddball. This is Drastic. This is kind of was a charity comic. This was basically one of the guys that's part of the Comic Book Men show, that's part of the whole Jay and Silent Bob's Secret Stash store and all that kind of stuff. Don't remember which one because I didn't write it down. Had made a comic that had never been published. So they decided to, as a fundraiser for the shop during all the COVID stuff and everything else, to print a few and start putting them up for auction. So they were basically selling one copy a week. So you're not going to find this thing on secondary market. And as a result, like Tom and Key Collector put it on the list because one went for $300. That's kind of cool. It's kind of a cool thing, but there's no there's no listings, there's no sales, there's no results, there's not that many. There's probably only a handful of these things out there. So this thing's just a pure ghost. So it's hard to get any kind of read on the market, but I did want to mention it just because it was on the list. Next, we're going to move into our covers. We have several covers this week. First up, we have Spawn 226. This is the sketch variant. And this is a Hulk 340 homage. Obviously, that famous Hulk cover with Wolverine and Hulk reflecting in his claws. This is a pretty low print Spawn anyway, and then this is the variant, so it's even more low print. Back then, a 9.8 went for $15 and $17.87. So there were two 9.8 sales, one for $1,500, one for $17.87. All I can find right now were two, at least recently, were two raws that had sold, one for 300 and one for 725. So there's quite, these don't come up a lot. When they do come up, it kind of just depends on who realizes they're up and for how much they're going to go for, how many bidders you get. There is a 9.8 currently listed for just under 1,200. So probably this isn't, I would say it's down because it's not selling that 1,100 and something dollar book isn't selling. But this is just kind of also a little bit of a ghost. It's tough to track down. So it's kind of one of those you got to grab when you have the opportunity. Next, we have Wolverine #1, the John Tyler Christopher negative space variant from C2E2, and as it turned out, Emerald City Comic Con. C2E2 happened. Emerald City just got released to the market separately. Their stock of this book. Back then, this has been a very popular cover since it came out. Back then, it was hitting 160 plus for a raw copy. And it's still basically going in that same range. 150 to 200 is what a raw is going to cost you. A 9.8 is going to run you $300 to $400. Result is this book has been pretty steady, and it's been highly valued since the moment it hit the secondary market. Next, we have Dr. Aphra, #1, the 1 in 25 Witter variant, and this is from the new series. This came out just back in spring. Back then, this thing was hitting $70. Now it's a $25 to $40 book, so this one is definitely falling back. 9.8s go for, though, pretty good, 125 to 175, and like I said, it's still going for over ratio, so that's pretty good for 1 in 25, just not the peak right after it came out. So yeah, so it's down, but it's definitely an I'll be back. Still a really cool cover. A character a lot of people are still specking on that will come to some sort of Star Wars show at some point. Next, we have Disaster Inc. #1, and this is a Momoko limited to 300 variant. And yeah, assigned one of these went for 9.8, went for 500. Is why it hit the list. They didn't really say what other values we're going for, like a raw copy or a 9.8. But a raw copy is still costing you 40 to 60, which is interesting because a 9.8 is costing you 40 to 90. Literally, there's been raw copies sale for more than the 9.8. There's not a bunch of these out there, but there are a fairly steady string of sales. And yeah, the price is a little... People are chasing the raw copies for more than even a listed 9.8, which is kind of weird, but that's what's kind of going on with this book. Momoko is still a very popular artist, but not touching that $500 for this one at least. Next, we have kind of a cover / comic buzz, and this is Venom #25, and this is the Clayton Crane and another Hulk cover homage. And this one was basically... I don't know what it was going for back then. CBSI put it on the list. This is one of 2 books they did this for this week, which is unusual. And they didn't put any pricing information. So obviously eBay doesn't let you go back that far. And this book was new, so there wasn't really any 9.8 sales to go back and look at. So I don't really know what the prices were. So I looked at the last 3 months. The book is kind of a little all over the place. Raw copies go anywhere from 40 to 100. 9.8 anywhere literally from 100 to 200. But it seemed mostly steady over the last 3 months, although it does seem to be slowly ticking down just a little bit. Every so often there's a sale back at those higher prices from the beginning of the period, but it is slowly dropping, it does feel like. We'll see if that continues with King of Black going on right now. Next, we go fully into comic buzz, and the first one is The New Guardians #2. I told you this was a strange week. This is the first appearance of Snowflame. This character is rather notorious. I won't go into why on my channel at least, but you can look him up if you want to, but it has to do with, his powers come from using recreational drugs. But anyway, we're not going to go any further than that. It's a character that had only ever appeared in this one book. But DC brought him back for, according to the solicits, we're going to bring him back for a couple of issues of Catwoman. They did. I read that run. They don't really address how he gets his powers. They do sort of indirectly, but they don't really lean into it, thankfully. But this book jumped up because people heard they were bringing him back, and he's such a unique character. It jumped up to a $35 book. It's now a $10 to $20 book. I'll be surprised if Snowflame really gets used very much. Let's just put it that way. So definitely not one I would have invested in personally. Next, speaking of not invest in, What If number 34. And basically, and I don't know what this was about. I couldn't remember, and I decided I was too lazy to look it up. It had to do something with a yellow Hulk. There was something, I don't know if it was in the Venom run or what, where there was like a yellow Hulk or something. Well, people jumped on this What If because in this What If, there's a single panel that's basically, they did this in a bunch of these where they were parodying what ifs. Like they were doing a parody of even the What If, and it was, what if the Hulk was yellow or something? So it's a different Hulk even than the yellow Hulk they're talking about now. But people started going after this book and were paying 10 plus for it. There was a ton of sales, which is why Tom and Key Collector put it on the list again, more than the value. And now it's $1 to occasionally $5 book. Yeah. Sometimes I don't know what we chase. I really just don't. Next we have, speaking of Venom related stuff, we have Eternals number 18. The first appearance of Zurin the Tester. And this is a Celestial. And this appears to be the Celestial that was spotted in Venom 25 being taken over by a symbiote. So that's why people were jumping on this. A 9.8 went for $175, which is why it hit the list. Now you can literally buy raw copies for $5 to $10. I will say, even just a month and a half, 2 months ago, they were still doing 20 to 30, but they're now all the way down to 5 to 10. 9.6 did go for $125, so doesn't appear to be, that actually still appears most likely would be a 9.8, would still probably be in that 175 range, but it is overall down because after it hit this list, it jumped to a 9.8 sales went for $475 and $375. Then it went a couple months, and then one went for $235, and then there hasn't been a sale since August of a 9.8 of this book. So, Dedicates is throwing a symbiote on almost everything during this run. Not all of these are going to matter. Don't think this is one that's going to matter, but we'll see. Next, we're going to move into a previews. Again, there's a bunch of previews that made the list during this period. And this is Previews Volume 2, Number 3. The preview of Spawn. And he's on the cover, and this predates some of the other previews or first appearances of Spawn. And back then, one of these went for $750 raw. Now, there's only been 3 sales recently, all in the $2 to $250 range, which still is a lot for previews, but a little more reasonable, I would guess, than that $750. So another one that's way down. Spawn's a really cool character. Probably not the book I would chase if I was going after the first appearance of Spawn. I'm not a big fan of the previews, but you know what? To each their own. Next, we're moving out of Comic Buzz and into DC TV. And this was right after the introduction of the Stargirl show. It's one of the few ones that I think is still going, or they're going to keep going. And this is Stars and Stripe number 0. The first appearance of Stargirl. And this, basically the show was doing well, and this book hit the list, and once again, CBSI didn't give me a price or any pricing information, so I looked, again, just over the trend over the last 3 months where I could kind of get some data, and this has been really steady. It's, 30 to 60 for a raw copy, 3 to 350 for a 9.8, maybe ticking down just a little bit over the 3 months, but not very much. Definitely book that's sitting with pretty good value. The show's going to keep going for now, so doing pretty well on this one. Next, we're moving into some Marvel spec. And during this period, there hasn't been much actual news from Marvel during all of this period we're looking back on right now, so there was a lot of just random spec. And this is Submariner number 5, the first appearance of Tiger Shark. And basically, this was prompted because everybody's been specking on Namor, and they're like, well, who would be the villain? And they went to Tiger Shark. Back then, raw copies were averaging around 180. 9.6 went for $15.50. And now, Most raw copies are going in the $40 to $80 range, although really high grade ones will hit you for $100 plus. There haven't been any 9.6 sales since then. 9.2s are going pretty steady around 500. So I would call, what did I say? I decided to call this one. Maybe down a little bit. It's definitely down for raw copies. But overall, still a really solid book and definitely a key that would be worth having if you're interested in Namor and Tiger Shark. So next, we're going to talk about Ghost Rider #1. And obviously, this is the first solo title of Ghost Rider, so this book has a lot of value anyway. But this is also a cameo of Damian Hellstrom. And basically, this has to do with the Netflix show that has already come out. I haven't watched. I haven't even heard anybody really talk about it. So I don't know if that's a good or a bad thing. But so I know at least some of the episodes are already out. Back then, raw copies were averaging around 500. 9.6 went for 17. So there was I don't know if this was a huge increase in value with this cameo as opposed to just the value of the book anyway, but I think there was a big increase in sales. Now, though, raw copies are averaging 200 to 300, so it has dropped back significantly on at least the average raw copy right now. Again, like the last book, no 9.6 sales since. 9.0s, though, we're going for around 600. Again, a really solid book, but just no reason to chase it during the buzz. You could have done a little better if you'd been just patient. We still have 5 books to go. So we are through 15 books. We still have 5 books to go. 2 more Marvel and then some Star Wars at the end. Next, we have Ultimate Fallout 4, the second print, white cover. And yeah, May, June, July, and Ultimate Fallout or Miles Morales book of some sort pretty much hit the list every week. This week was no different. We were in the middle of Miles Mania. It was going crazy back then. Raw copies of this second print would run you 40 to 60 with 9.8s running 3 to 320. This book has come back for 9.8 significantly. Raw copies, though, are still sitting in that same 40 to 50 range, so a little lower, but not much. 9.8s, 175, 200. So this one was definitely turned out to be a little bit of an I'll be back. Miles is still going pretty strong, but there has been a little bit of a cool from the craziness of the summer to make them a little more affordable. Next, we have Amazing Spider-Man #5, the second appearance of Silk and kind of her first cover. I mean, she's sort of Cindy Moon. You can see part of her on the cover of 4, but you can actually see her as Silk in the background on the cover of 5. And this is basically, this hit the list because the 9.8 went for $65, and there was a lot of sales on this particular book. Raw copies of this still only cost you $10 to $20, which is not bad for a second appearance. 9.8s right now are still going 35 to 60, so not much more than even the slab cost if you catch the right 9.8. So this one's down, but solid second appearances. I don't know how huge this will be, but you think about what the second appearance of Miles has done, that kind of stuff. If they make a Silk movie, who knows? Next, we're going to move into Star Wars. And first up, we have Star Wars, Kanan the Last Padawan, #6. So, and this is according to Key Collector, the first full appearance, and a lot of collectors, the first full appearance of Sabine Wren, Ezra Bridger, the whole crew other than Kanan. And they're all on the cover. This is their first cover appearance. And now this differs from CGC. CGC says the first appearance is #1. Key Collector and Tom talked about this a lot during their video that, you know, based on the cameo rules established by 180 versus 181, this should be the first appearance. So this seems to be the book people are chasing. I think it has more to do with the cover. They all appear in one, but only on a single page, in a single panel, but they all also speak. They're not all named, I don't think, in that panel, but yeah, I don't know. I think they're both solid books. But this one was going for $30 back then, and this thing has went up, up, up. It's now a $50 to $100 book for a raw copy, depending on how high quality it is. And actually, even since I did this data, there's been a couple of sales that have been over $100 for raw copies. So this one is creeping up. 9.8s are running anywhere from $300 to $400, with the last few sales being closer to $400. Yeah, this book's been straight cash, like everything Star Wars. People are specking on these characters hard. Several of them are still alive in canon. And with some of the reveals in The Mandalorian over the last few weeks, people think these characters are coming, and I would guess they're probably right. Next up, we have Star Wars number 42, first appearance of Boba Fett, Yoda, the Emperor, but this was hitting the list because of Boba Fett, because there are rumors he was coming to The Mandalorian. We'll avoid spoilers, but needless to say that there's been some truth to those rumors. 9.8 was hit a record back then of 826. Yeah, it's blown that record away. Right now, 9.8s are going for around 1,500. We'll see as the season keeps going. Yeah, it looks like Boba Fett's going to appear more than just in a little cameo. We'll see. But my guess is this book climbs even more. Raw copies will run you $100 to $250. This book was probably way undervalued anyway, with Yoda and Boba Fett and the Emperor all first appearing in this book, as well as some other characters. And it's probably, honestly, just kind of getting to where it deserves to be. But this one is up over the last 6 months and probably going to keep going up. And finally, we have another book Jason should have bought, looked at a bunch of times, never pulled the trigger on. And it is Star Wars Heir to the Empire, #1, the first appearance of Admiral Thrawn and Mara Jade. Two legacy characters, one of which Disney has brought back, and Thrawn, both in the Rebel show and in comics. Back then, this book was hitting $50, and this is all based on rumors that there would be something in this new Disney Plus Mandalorian verse. There's been rumors in the last week or so that there's actually going to adapt this whole storyline into either movies or shows. And then, yeah, and then some of the events of the show have aided in this speculation. So this book is currently going through the roof. 3 weeks ago, it was still sitting around $50, which was actually back down from where it peaked later in the summer. It had gotten higher than that and then had come back down. It was still going $50 to $80 raw 3 weeks ago. Now it's a $100 to $250 book raw. A 9.8, as I said, is $1,400 to $1,500. Yeah. Thrawn is really hot right now. And so is Star Wars, as you can see by these last 3 books. So that is this week's list. There was a lot of just random crap kind of in the beginning of this, but the Star Wars books at the end are all red hot still. I want to thank you guys for watching, and we will catch you next time.